Hi, W.
Yeah.
I think we should begin.
Okay. Sounds
So
good.
yeah. Hi everyone, welcome to today's Twitter Spaces with W from the Symmetric team, who just launched their V3 yesterday on Meet and Mainnet. Very excited to have you here with us, W. Thanks a lot for joining.
Yeah, super happy to be here and talk about Symmetric, our launch, and yeah, really excited to be live on Meter.
Sounds great. So let's begin with an intro on yourself and the wider team. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and your team's background?
Sure. So we have a core team of three co-founders, and we've worked together for quite some time at this point. We originally launched Symmetric back in 2021 on XDAI, which is now Gnosis, and Celo. And yeah, we've been working on Symmetric for a long time. We've been working on balancer forks. We're actually the longest running balancer fork. So our three co-founders are myself, Uzi, and Steven. And the three of us bringing a ton of technical expertise, business expertise, and finance expertise, both in and outside of the crypto space. So yeah, we've been at this for a while, and it's really both something we love doing.
Awesome stuff. Yeah. Now, so let's talk about Symmetric. You mentioned the balancer model. So one of the main advantages we'll see is increased liquidity efficiency on Meter Network. Can you tell us more about what Symmetric is and what makes it different compared to other multi-chain AMMs indexes?
Sure, sure. So you hit the nail right on the head that we use the balancer model underneath the hood, our balancer V2 core contracts right now. And I think the first thing that a user would notice as different is the various weights of the pools. So, on your traditional DEX AMMs, you're going to see 50-50 pools, and liquidity providers are going to be required to provide 50-50 into any of the pools that they join and provide liquidity in. And that model has worked great. That's what originally Uniswap was built off of. But it's not for everything. And if you, I think, use it for everything, you end up with, I think, as you alluded to, a lot of inefficiency. And so the balancer model allows folks to make pools of varying weights and with multiple assets in them as well. So I think that's the most obvious difference is that it's really, really highly customizable. You can make pools 99-1, so 99% one asset, one another. And then probably the most famous of the weighted pools that I think a lot of people have probably seen somewhere are the 80-20 pools. And the really cool thing about an 80-20 pool is it lowers impermanent loss. I've seen these studies, and I'm sure a lot of other DeFi users have seen them as well, that show that a lot of liquidity providers in 50-50 pools actually lose money, even including the incentives, because it's just not that efficient, or one of the assets goes way up in value, and they would have done better if they would have just held the tokens in their wallets. Um, an 80-20 pool can help users with that bullish orientation avoid a lot of that impermanent loss.
Right. Yeah. It's a graph, isn't it, that basically goes down as the price as a percentage of the initial price goes up.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. So yeah, you guys recently upgraded to the V3. What are some of the major differences between the Symmetric V2 and the V3?
Sure. So in V3, the first thing we did was we streamlined our UI. So we really cleaned up a lot of the things that aren't needed to make it run as smoothly and fast and quickly as possible. And so our users immediately saw an upgraded UI, but we also started really taking advantage of the things, the more advanced features that balancer contracts allow us to. Namely, one of them that I think is going to be really, really important to the Meter ecosystem are called composable stable pools. And so the beauty of composable stable pools, anybody familiar with Curve understands what stable math looks like in a pool. So those soft pegged or highly correlated assets, you're able to trade them on a flatter curve. This is a lot more efficient, especially for stables or things like stake tokens. So in our case, it's meter G wrapped staked meter G, and these pools are just going to be a lot more efficient. But that's not the only real advantage of composable stable pools. You can nest those tokens. So if you go to our DApp now on Meter or any of our other chains, especially Telos, what you'll see is you'll see one core stable pool. On Meter right now, it is made up of USDC, USDT, and SUUSD from Sumer. Um, and so, that this core stable pool then can be nested with other assets. So it provides this direct, super efficient path. And in our case, we've paired that nested pool with Meter G. And so it really makes it quite a bit more efficient to go from meter G to any of the three core stables. And it allows these pools to be nested really anywhere. The other really great thing about composable stable pools is they have price rate providers built into them. And so this is one of the things that we started taking advantage of in V3. And this means that you're going to get a constant price rate on, so for example, like stake meter G, right? It's going to slowly accrue more value and more value and more value, right? And on other dexes, the inefficient way that that's dealt with is through arbitrage. Well, with price rate providers, it allows us to keep a, the curve flat and flat and flat and flat, and that really helps with efficiency as well. So, I think on Meter, you're especially going to see these composable stable pools as really useful for stables and for wrap stake Meter G or stake Meter G.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned impermanent loss earlier. I think coupled with that, fragmented liquidity is a big issue, and so solving that, we should see, like you mentioned, increased APRs for the liquidity pools on meters, on the main pairs on Meter, as well as increased access to the Meter ecosystem.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is, I was just doing a comparison, and we are really, really efficient already with just a fairly small amount of liquidity in that stable pool. I think we're around 60K in there right now, and you can make 10K trades pretty efficiently even on 60K. So as we see that liquidity increase upwards into the seven figures, you're going to see a really, really accessible blockchain for larger and larger holders, larger and larger whale types coming into the ecosystem. And I think that's going to be really, really helpful as Meter continues to grow.
Definitely, yeah, super exciting. So great. Now let's talk about tokenomics. So you have the MSYMM, which is not a bridge token. I believe it's native to Meter and distributed exclusively on Meter network. And you have the VMSYMM, which is your vesting token and has a decreasing emission schedule. Can you run us through, what this means in a bit more detail?
Yeah, sure. So we use a voting escrow model for governance, and MSIM is our chain native governance token on Meter. And what VMSIM is VMSIM is actually like a locked version of that token. So this is how, if you lock your LP tokens from the 80/20 MSIM stake meter G pool, and you could choose to lock them up for a year, then you receive MSIM, or VMSIM, I'm sorry, at a linear rate. So, you would get twice as much MSIM for locking for a year than you would if you locked the same amount for 6 months. So it's linear. And the voting escrow model allows us to create long-term and medium-term stability for the MSIM token, and thus provide a lot of stability to the protocol. So this particular pool, VM SIM holders are heavily incentivized to lock these tokens because they're going to get a portion of the Meter G incentives that are coming in. They're going to get a portion of whatever the gauge is. So I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. of MSIM rewards that are going to go to the pool. And they're also going to get a portion of the protocol fees, which as we grow will be really fairly significant, I think. And so that voting escrow model also allows users, I just mentioned the gauges, to vote on where incentives go. All of the, any VM sim holder can vote weekly to decide where MSIM incentives are going to flow for the next week. And so this is, the first layer of governance that will be live on Meter Wednesday at midnight UTC. So yeah, it's a voting escrow model. It's modified a little bit from the original kind of curve voting escrow model where you had up to a 4-year lockup. Our max lockup is a year.
Got it. Okay, great. Yeah, I know a lot of thought went into creating the distribution to ensure its sustainability. So sounds good. So let's now talk a bit about our collab specifically. What makes Symmetric a great fit for Meta?
Well, we think there's I think from the get-go, when we started looking in more to Meter, I'd heard of it long ago, and knew the model. But when we started looking into building on Meter, I think we see that there's a lot of potential. I think you have some good protocols there already. Sumer is a really fantastic protocol. VoltSwap does a really, really good job sort of providing that core liquidity space. But there's really some of these building blocks, like the things that I've mentioned with stable pools and composable stable pools, that we think we can step in, provide, and increase efficiency. And therefore, we think it'll bring in a lot of liquidity to the protocol. And liquidity, is the lifeblood of any DEX, AMM project. So first off, we see that there's a lot of potential. Second, we were really, really impressed with the team when we met with you, when we've had the chance to talk with you, and presented an initial proposal. The team is incredibly professional, really, really on top of things, and have been just great to work with. So, and I think on top of that, I think Meteor has some fairly unique USPs that I think the wider crypto community hasn't discovered yet, particularly with the dual token model and the gas token and the energy token, gas and energy token, along with the governance token. So I think we think that there's a lot of potential for growth, and one of the things that we want to do is to be part of that growth.
Yeah, awesome. And likewise, we're very excited to bring you guys on board. As we mentioned, fragmented liquidity is a huge issue. I want to actually go back and touch on the multi-asset liquidity nature again. So, you have a few different types of liquidity pools, such as the composable stable pool you mentioned versus the more traditional pools. I see also like there's yield bearing. You can have blue chip assets. Can you give us another rundown of what each one actually means and the different types of pools that users can start using straight away?
Sure, of course. So right away, I'll talk about sort of the core pools that we're launching with. And gosh, I can't believe that I also failed to mention our partners over with Meridian. We've worked with Meridian now for a number of months, and that's one of the core pools that we're launching with as well, with their MST token. But you'll see that right there is like a traditional 50-50 pool. This is going to operate a lot like your traditional Uniswap style pool. It is technically classified as a weighted pool, but this one is going to be just straight up 50-50 trading between Meter G and MST. I mentioned the composable stable pool. So if you see this, you'll see 3 assets in that pool, right? And there's roughly, I think right now, about 20,000 of each asset in there. This is the composable stable pool that I talked a lot about earlier. And the wonderful thing about this pool, that as I was kind of running through it earlier, is that it's got both stable math, so it's incredibly efficient in the way that it works, and on top of that, you're going to be able to easily get between these 3 stables in a really efficient way. Now, with the Meter G pool, and you'll see it listed as having all three stables in meter G. What that really is LP tokens that are nested inside that initial pool, right? And then added to that pool with meter G. So this provides a really, really, really efficient route between all the stables in meter G on our decks. And then you'll see our 80/20 pool. That's the MSIM wrapped stake meter G. We're still, if you're checking out the DApp, we're still waiting for Gecko Terminal to pick up the price on that, but we expect it to happen any time. But there is quite a bit of liquidity in there for MSIM right now as well. And that's your traditional 80/20 pool. This is a weighted pool that, in this case, it allows us to increase liquidity in MSIM in a really, really efficient way. It allows users, as they earn NSIM as rewards, to easily get into that pool. And it's also made with a yield-bearing asset, which can be really, really helpful because that's going to create some native yield into that pool as well from the wrap stake meter G. And then you'll see what the meter G wrap stake meter G pool, and you'll see that there's no numbers next to that. So that's not a weighted pool when you see no numbers next to it. What that is another composable stable pool. And we expect this pool to get a ton of liquidity. One of the things that I think we also see on Meter Network right now, on Meter Mainnet, with the existing DeFi ecosystem, is that staked meter G is really a sleeping giant. And so we expect that pool to layer that native yield with wrap stake meter G on top of liquidity rewards, on top of meter G rewards. And we really expect that number to get really, really big in that pool. And
Right.
and the advantage for the ecosystem is you're going to be able to really, really get between stake meter G and meter G efficiently.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
most efficient pool, right?
oh, yeah, it's going to be incredibly efficient in the way that it
With
works.
the highest yields, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you'll see right now it's only got like it hasn't, emissions and rewards haven't started yet. So APR is still pretty low, but all of that APR right now is coming from swap fees, which is pretty crazy. It's it's that efficient that it's already picking up volume with only like $150 in liquidity in there. It's going to work really, really well.
Definitely, yeah. Can't wait. So, okay, so we've mentioned all the pools. What's the best way for someone to get involved?
So, we have no pre-sale for our MSIM token. Like I said, I think right now liquidity is live there. Yeah, like I said, we're waiting for Gecko Terminal to pick up the price feed there. But we've already had some holders buy and lock MSIM. And so locking that LP token, that MSIM rape stake meter G, gets you, you're a VM sim holder now. And as a VM sim holder, you're voting on where the incentives go each week. So you have a say in control of where the incentives go, but it's also gonna be really, really heavily incentivized. And so what you're likely to see coming from that pool is going to be really, really high incentives. And yeah, I expect it to perform really well. So being a VM sim holder gets you involved in governance. It's extremely rewarding. And we've seen in the past that, it's been a nice asset to have locked up, especially if we're expecting a bull market. But we also, of course, the other actors in our system are just as important, and that's those that provide liquidity. And so, we need liquidity. It's a lifeblood, and we're going to heavily incentivize that liquidity, especially at the beginning. And we hope that brings the sort of liquidity that Meter as a network needs right now. And then finally, gosh, we just want to be a good place to swap, you know. So yeah, come swap, come, check out the rates, especially on the stables if you're trying to get between stables. And if you're a ecosystem project, hit us up. We'd love to collaborate with you as well.
That's great. So to lock and vest SIM, is it a straightforward process?
Yeah, it's straightforward. So when you add liquidity to the pool, right after you add liquidity, there's going to be a little thing that says lock LP for VM sim, and it is. It's a really straightforward process. It'll allow you to choose a date that that you lock until up to a year out, and so yeah, it's a really straightforward process. Again, I'll tell you the amount of VM sim that you'll ultimately receive, right? Well, is a direct linear relationship to how long you lock it for, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, again, like 6 months. If you locked it for a year, it would be double what it would be for 6 months.
Is there a maximum?
Lockup period?
Yeah.
Yeah. A year is the max lock period, but you can relock whenever you want as well. So, a lot of folks wait a couple weeks and then they relock because by relocking, their VM sim number will go up.
Got it. Awesome stuff. Is there anything our users should look out for? Looping strategies or slippage, that sort of thing.
Well, I on Symmetric right now, I wouldn't, but I would think that, especially with looping strategies using Sumer and eventually, as we see, I think more lending protocols on here, the highly efficient nature of the stable pools are going to make those strategies that much more a lucrative, I think. And on top of that, as people use those strategies and volume increases for that pool, just holding stables is going to be incredibly rewarding for users as well. Um, but yeah, I think as the meter team continues to help build out this ecosystem, we're going to see a lot more strategies as well. One of the things that we've been talking about working with Meridian on both Telos and Meter for a while is integrating not just USDM, but some of their lending tokens into the platform as well as another way to sort of layer that yield. So yeah, look for that as well coming up in the future. But our pools are pretty straightforward. Of course, it's DeFi. There are always risks in contracts. There are always risks in DeFi, but we're using some of the most battle tested contracts out there, and we've been working on them for quite a long time. So we're pretty confident in what we put out there.
Yeah, sounds great. Um, let's go back to our good friends over at Meridian. You mentioned them a few times. Can you give us a kind of roadmap, summary of how the partnership will evolve?
Sure. So I think one of the things is as Meridian continues to build out on Meter right now, I think Lend is the one that's live, but they also have a permissionless stablecoin as well, over collateralized stablecoin called USDM. And so we initially started working with them on Telos to have a place for liquidity for both USDM that was highly efficient because it's a stable. And the way it's worked on Telos is we've taken our core stable pool, composable stable pool, and then nested that with USDM as well. So it makes easy stable routes between the two, between USDM and the other stables. I would expect that sort of partnership would continue on Meter, assuming if and when they launch their stable token on the Meter network as well. But with Lend, what we're trying to build, right, is wrappers for the deposit tokens. For their, a lot of times you'll hear them called zero tokens, or you'll hear them, in this case, they're probably called M tokens. But these tokens are like what you get when you deposit. So if you deposit, say, meter, you would get like a M meter that signifies that you've made that deposit and that debt is owed to you. Now, much like, say, staked meter G, these are going to generate yield. And at the same time, if you use them in DeFi, you can layer that yield. So that's what we're really looking forward to building with Meter in the near future. It takes a little under the hood work. and then you want to be able to abstract away as many of the steps as possible for the users to make it a good user experience. So, but that's, I think, one of the things you'll see with them. We've just been incredibly impressed with their team since we started working with them. Yair and TJ are really wonderful guys. They've been in the business a long time, and just sort of open, transparent, honest folks, which you know goes a long way in this work.
100%. Yeah. No, we're very excited to have you both in the Meter ecosystem. So lastly, we mentioned some rewards for early adopters. Can you give us some alpha there?
I can, yeah. Anybody checking this out? Look, if you get in this week, that'll be our first incentives. We are going to airdrop $1,000 worth of Meter G at launch price. So we launched on Wednesday, and we're going to airdrop $1,000 worth of MSIM, divided between however many people lock up VM SIM in that first week based on the amount of VM SIM they have. So, we've talked about how it is that you get MSIM, put it in the LP, you lock it. The longer the lock, the longer they get it. Well, that 2K combined in Meter G and MSIM tokens are going to be distributed in between, all of those VM SIM holders. That in the first week. After that, we're really looking forward to our token emissions starting on Wednesday at midnight UTC. So that's when you're going to see those APRs go crazy. So if you want the be the early bird getting the worm, that's your cutoff date. That's when you'll see those numbers fly. Will be Wednesday night at midnight UTC. And then you'll see both Meter G incentives and MSIM incentives start flowing to the pools. And our claims page will be up. The one thing I would want to tell users is that all of the rewards are instantly claimable, except for VM SIM. Those are distributed weekly along with protocol fees. So if those VM SIM rewards, you'll have to wait a week to collect.
Got it. Nice. Awesome. Well, get involved, everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really looking forward to Wednesday. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Definitely. And we'll retweet and get all that information out again and remind everyone. But yeah, get involved now this week before the mission starts.
Yeah, and I will invite Voyager, who's been diligently listening to the whole episode. If you'd like to DM me your wallet address on Meter, I'll send you a few MSIM for coming in and hearing us out today. Get them locked up before Wednesday, and you'll receive some of the incentives too.
Awesome stuff. I know we're at the half an hour mark now, so this has been excellent Twitter Spaces. Really want to thank you for joining, Dude, and everyone who tuned in, Voyager. One last question for you. I really like the name Symmetric. How did you guys come up with that?
Yeah, it makes sense with the way that our pools work, right? And so it seemed pretty slick at the time, and it helped draw me to the project because I wasn't there when we launched on XDAI. I was there when we launched on Celo. So while I've been there for over 3 years, my co-founders initially launched XDAI, so they're the ones who picked it, but. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think anybody who thinks about it can think, oh, yeah, I think I know what they're doing. They're doing balancer contracts, So, yeah, I think it works out.
Yeah. Sounds great. All right. Well, yeah, thanks a lot for joining, Dude. Everyone listening, check out the Medium guide for more info and head to app.sim.fi to get involved now and connect to the Meter network to see the pools. But yeah, thanks a lot for listening, everyone.
Yeah, hit up our Telegram. Ask me any questions that you have. I'm always here, happy to answer them.
Awesome stuff. Thanks a lot for coming on. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.